that's the point she was making. And I think it's disingenuous of you to suggest that. I mean, first of all, most of these conservatives don't even care about the black crime that's taking place in cities like Chicago and other places. And if they actually,
I sure do, and I live there.
If they actually listen to what black people are saying, the majority of black people, 74% of black people support an assault weapons ban. 86% of black people support a federal registry of gun purchases. If you want to listen to what black people and black parents are saying about weapons and about the gun crime in our communities, then listen to us. Don't just lecture us from a CPAC conference. And how dare she go? How dare she go to CPAC and say that when the night before she was on the town hall on CNN in Parkland and she refused to say any of that? What a cowardly thing to go to a CPAC conference in front of a conservative audience and make those comments. Just like Wayne LaPierre. Why didn't?
Are you a conservative? Do you consider yourself a conservative? I mean, I know sort of what your politics are, mostly through Twitter and the show, but I'm not sure.
I think I don't want to reject the conservative label.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've written for the Huffington Post. You know, I'm anti-guns. I think the Second Amendment is a farce in 2017.
So you would scrap it all together?
Yeah, the Second Amendment's a joke.
Really?
In my view. I think that, you know, the right to bear arms and to have a militia to protect yourself against the government and all, I think made sense back when the Constitution was written. But unless we're all going to have access to drones, we really can't protect ourselves against the government. Yeah, no. I don't have any stealth bombers, anything.
But how do you reconcile that as someone that obviously has a healthy distrust of power?
Again, I just think guns are unhealthy. I think that gun violence, I'm an African American, and when you look at the statistics about who gun violence really impacts, it's us. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I just look at the stats and say, you own a gun in your home, you're more likely to shoot a family member, a friend, a loved one than you are an intruder. And again, I get why people like to hunt. I'm not against hunting and guns for that reason, but all the handguns that are proliferated and all the semi-automatic weapons and all the stuff people are buying up, preparing for the end of the United States of America, if the government decides they want to take us out, they'll drone, tank, stealth us into submission, and our guns won't mean that much. So you
think it's a lost battle anyway with our
supposed to have a gun. And so I really don't like guns. I really don't like guns. I think that the more that, you know, people possess guns, the more they're going to use them. And I wish that we could shut it down. I really do. I understand what you're saying, the differences in the various states, and they have a right to create their own laws. The federal government can't override all of that. I just think in our community, we must not only educate about guns and be aware of the violence that takes place and work very hard to do everything that we can to tell folks this is not the way to solve a dispute. Right. This is not the way to deal with the fact that somebody has, you know, dissed you. We cannot kill each other.
Are you pie or baseball games, gun violence is uniquely an American problem. Prior to 2011, we were averaging mass shootings 200 times a day. Since 2015, we're at 64 mass shootings per day. And what we see in Las Vegas was not a crime of opportunity. This was a premeditated act of a domestic terrorist. And just because his last name is not hard for us to say, we have to use the correct labels here. And what is true here is that when you have hatred, you cannot regulate that. You cannot regulate evil, but you can regulate guns. Yeah.
Those are being stupid as fuck about gun control. You're not gonna fight off a tyrannical government with an AR-15 or an M16, so give it up. It's not a constitutional right. They didn't have assault weapons when the Constitution was written. It took 10 minutes to load 2 bullets. Get the fucking AR-15s off the street, or sacrifice your family and friends to mass murder. That's the only way it could go.
Peace and love, baby.
Also, peace and love.
That is, I think, the real challenge.
There wasn't a lot of talk about guns at the listening session today.
No. No, I mean, so again, you know, we go to, I think my default is you need to ban assault weapons. And then there's a conversation with Republicans on, well, that hasn't been effective. I had that conversation, tried to have that conversation with SC earlier. And I think the issue here is folks get caught up in the assault weapons but don't talk about the exemptions.
Yeah, I want to get Paris in. Paris, so listen, 97% of Americans.
That's with people who somehow believe that the Second Amendment says that literally anybody at any time can have any type of gun. I'm sorry, a gun should not be easy to get. Right. It shouldn't be. I mean,
you have 310 million privately owned guns, and you have people still saying that we should be selling more. That's what has to be attacked. Frankly, I don't think the reporting on it. You know, Vox has been doing some great reporting on this, and a lot of people have been going there on this. I mean, there's an expletive related hashtag that comes out with regard to the NRA when these things happen, and it gets right to the point. I don't think it's the reporting; it's the lobbying. It is the political pressure, and until that changes,
let me just say this: the Second Amendment isn't going anywhere. The NRA, with all due respect, isn't going anywhere. We've got to find a way to make it difficult. Well, but that's what I'm about to. You're waiting for me. We've got to make it more difficult for politicians and elected officials to be intimidated by the NRA. We got to strengthen our own lobby and make it difficult for them to do it, and make it difficult for them to get elected if they aren't for common sense gun laws.
The voter has
because we can control that.
That's
right. We can't control the NRA or the Second Amendment.
That NRA political arm is something that has to be replicated on the left to counter them, and that hasn't really happened.
You can't make their lobby illegal. You can't eliminate them.
You have to figure out who you actually want to target as well, because it's not just, it's not just that every single no one's going to say they're in favor of mass shootings, right? I mean, they all say it's mass shootings. The argument comes in when people say, well, this isn't how you fix it. So we have to actually target who are the specific individuals in the House in this one.
That isn't going to happen.
That's part of the problem then.
And you brush aside the idea that other responsible people who've shown a commitment to these children.
No, I think that people who have guns,
undertake that
most of the people who have guns are responsible and use them responsibly. That is not the issue, and you're conflating two different issues. That's not the issue. But do you need a military-grade weapon on the streets of the United States? Anyone who is not a police officer or who is trained or licensed to use it? No, we don't need that. Why do we need to have that silly argument and pretend that it's other than our access to guns?
Well, if it's a silly argument, then it's not an argument at all.
Yeah, go on, Van.
So Ken makes a good point in talking about, listen, let's have an open mind and let's have a full conversation. And I am actually glad that
an open mind, though, Van, doesn't mean being stupid. Come on, let's be honest.
I'm trying to go somewhere, though. Let me.
The way to do it is to present the way other countries do it. The way they don't have mass shootings in schools, they don't actually have that number of they don't have the access to guns that we do. They don't allow people who have mental issues to have access to guns. They don't allow to have young people who have access to guns. They have universal background checks. They make sure that we actually restrict certain guns so they're not in use. We don't need to, everyone does not need to have an assault weapon.
Steve, quick answer, because I also want to get into a point that Dana Lash made today, but please respond.
Here's the other thing. Even if gun control were a good idea, which I don't think at all it is, but let's say for the sake of argument that it is, there are already 10 million AR-15s in this country. There are 300 million total guns. That toothpaste is not going back in the tube. We still have a problem with school shootings, and we need to protect our school children, even if I were to grant you gun control, which I certainly don't.
They did it in Australia.
Do you believe that Americans are going to give up their fundamental right? Australia is a very different country from America.
Nobody thought they would do it in Australia, but they had a gun buyback program that was very successful, and they've had no mass shootings since then.
I want to play, because this is a wide...
Legislators fear not just the NRA's money in terms of being able to lobby against them, but actually their safety, their physical safety, if they go up against people whose sole voting issue in life, the most important thing to them is having as many guns as they can get.
Well, I'll tell you, first off, all of us should be prepared to decry any threats of violence against any individual. I do hope, Joy, that you wear it as a badge of honor that you were called out as one of those folks who are calling out the NRA for their tactics. I mean, in our law here in Florida, in Tallahassee, it wasn't even as courageous as the representative mentioned. It simply said you can't shoot guns in city parks. And in spite of that, they took us to court. We got overloaded with their emails from the members from from across the country. These are commonsensical things, and you would even believe that members of the NRA would agree that, you know what, if it's 21 to have a beer, what is so radical about it being 21 in order for you to access a gun that unfortunately an AR-15 that can take out the lives of 17 individuals or 49 individuals in the case of Pulse nightclub? It's simply unreasonable, but it gives you a sense of how far they've been able to take this fight in many of the states, my state being ground zero for that fight. Well, I'll tell you, I beat them as a city councilman, and I look forward to beating them as the governor of the great state of Florida, that there will not be able to run roughshod over us and over our state and the 20 million people that call this state home.
And you know, these schools and these tragedies happen in America, and there's been no change to gun control. I don't have the answer to this, so let's just sit here and we all gonna just try to. We're just having like a round table right now because I don't have the answers to it, but we have to do something about it because we all sending our kids to school, right? All you guys who have kids, we're all sending our kids to school, and we all feel we drop them off at 8 o'clock. At 3:15, they're gonna be ready to get picked up. Either we're picking them up, or someone in our family is picking them up, or they have to take a bus, or if there's aftercare and they stay till 5. If they have study table, they have to stay till 5:30 or whatever. But we all feel like our kids are gonna return, right? We have a kid who wasn't legally not able to go to get a beer at a bar, but could go buy a AR-14 or AR-15. Like, is that how? It doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying he should be legal to go buy a beer, but I'm saying how is it possible that we can have minors to go buy a gun? I don't have the answer to it, but
nice.
In any civilized society, you do not see massacres continue to happen from Tucson to Aurora to Columbine to Virginia Tech to where we are now in Newtown to Chicago, and you keep the same laws when clearly they're not working.
What happens when the criminal goes to knives, Al?
Then you deal with knives.
Oh, I
see.
see.
The same thing as if you have a head cold, and the same thing you do if you have a head cold and the cold is gone and you have a headache. Then you take headache medicine. The job of society is to deal with whatever problem confronts it.
Will walk the walk and not just talk the talk? I've yet to see him walk much in a way that I think is, supportive of policy that helps to shape American lives in any real meaningful, positive way. The thing that is
just got a big tax cut that they're real happy with.
Yeah, but that's some folks are real happy with, particularly very elitist, rich folks are happy with.
No, middle class.
I would just want to talk about gun control right now, SC. Okay. We were just talking about how civil we've been for 5 years, so let's stay there, especially on an issue like this.
I'm trying to let you not get ahead of yourself here.
Oh, I don't need you to help me not get ahead of myself. I'm fully grown. I'm 38 years old, honey. Okay. So, one of the things that is maddening to me, Brooke, I remember when I first started working for the CBC.
Yeah.
One of the first issues we ended up taking on because it was a crisis was Gabby Giffords being shot. And I remember thinking before that moment, it's going to take it to happen to one of them before they do anything meaningful in this space.
That's what those students were telling me last week.
It's amazing, and that didn't even change it. So here you have yet another mass shooting, and you just have to wonder how many people have to die before we truly do something. And this isn't the first attempt. I remember President Obama wiping tears away from his eyes with Sandy Hook, right? So you just have to think, you know, these little piecemeal solutions won't work. That means that there are going to be gaping holes in the policy. We have to do something that results in real change. I think about...
But what about this potential real change, you know, from the president? Could happen, right? Raise the age of buying an AR-15 from 18 to 21. But
why are we selling AR-15s?
I think the danger...
That was a whole conversation.
That's exactly right.
But the danger here, and I understand the desire to do something that feels big, significant, impactful, but banning a whole category of guns that's responsible for less than 2% of gun crime might feel good, but doesn't actually work to solve gun crime. If you talk to people who have researched this, and from the left, in fact, they actually think the more targeted, discrete, narrow policies that address mental health specifically, domestic violence specifically, suicide specifically, actually have the bigger impact. So we know when we passed an assault weapons ban for 10 whole years, it did not measurably lower gun crime. And in fact, one of those banned guns was used in Columbine. We should be talking about laws that can help prevent future mass shootings.
But
Absolutely.
AR-15s, I mean, I know you say 2%, but 2%
Less than
is
2%.
Less than 2%.
Yeah.
Isn't
Still
that
people
too much
dead.
when you talk about 6 and 7-year-olds and when you talk about 16, 17, and
Well, when you
18-year-olds?
put it in that context, of course, it's awful. It's awful. But let's talk about the 80% of gun crime that's perpetrated in our cities, or suicide deaths equally as awful. And shouldn't we be finding ways, passable legislation, by the way, that can actually target gun crime,
Does she have
the
a point?
scourge of gun crime, in meaningful ways, not just ways that sound impactful, but really aren't?
I'm not pushing anything that just sounds impactful. I think that if we save one life, it matters. And so if this moment means that we'll start looking at things that we have traditionally ignored, I'm all for it. I am here to save the one life. And if it could be 1 million lives, amen to that too.
But
I don't think that we should take anything off the table right now. We need to be really coming to terms with the fact that we have a sick population that continues to do this. And I'm not just talking about folks with mental health issues. Maybe it's from video games. Maybe it's because they have access. Whatever it is, we need to be dealing with every single aspect of it. And by the way, Donald Trump, who first goes to Jeff Sessions and says, I want you to do something about the bump stocks. I want you to do something about the bump stocks. The very next day is undermining the person who he says will do something about it. But also very clear that it is going to require legislation. Where is he on Senator Feinstein's bill that would deal with this, right? So
it's assault weapons
there's
ban,
some very tangible things that can be done.
Let me ask you, ladies.
Tangible things that can be done is absurd. If it were a tangible thing that could be done, it would have been done when Democrats held the White House, the House, and the
I can tell you why. I'll give you 3 letters. NRA. Far too much control,
So
Essie.
you're saying Democrats are also acting
you didn't know that absolutely, you didn't know that there were Democrats who were beholden to NRA.
Oh no, I do. 54 of them lost their House seats.
Okay,
in
so then be clear. So then don't act like it's absurd.
No.
It's so sad that this is the energy in this conversation when people die. Like it doesn't have to be here.
Okay, that sounds really good. But let's talk in facts. When you say it's tangible to pass an assault weapons ban, it actually isn't. That's why Democrats didn't do it when they had total control.
No, it's time for us to take.
It's not going to happen now.
Yeah, now it's time for us to take the NRA out.
But they did do it under.
What do you mean take the NRA out? What does
it
that
means
mean?
it's time for us to limit the control the NRA has over the Congress because people are dying. It means that we start standing up organizations and fund them to do things very differently from what the NRA is doing. It means that
millions of people who make small dollar contributions like me. What would you want to take me out? How do you do that?
What I just said, if you wanted to have a conversation instead of just a debate.
I'm asking, how are you going to take me out?
But you're not listening.
I'm asking a very real question.
Yeah,
it's
so do you want to listen?
To take the NRA
I'm
out?
just talking platitudes. I just don't think
Angela?
I don't think. Do you want to listen now, or you still want to host?
I'm asking.
Okay, so what I said was there's organizations that are being stood up to combat the narratives, the policies that the NRA pushes, and we need to fund those organizations to ensure that the NRA's voice is not just muted, but we completely take them out because their regulations, the things that they push, are dangerous to this
funding
country.
organizations to message against the NRA.
It's not just
in
messaging.
Ways like
it's supporting organizations.
Which just drives.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about that. I'm not.
That was common sense. That was directly focused on increasing public safety in our city and county. I was proud when months ago district attorneys from across the country, 17 district attorneys elected from across the country, joined me when I asked them to submit a brief to the United States Supreme Court outlining why this decision, the Heller decision, could impact public safety in a way that could threaten lives across this country. I was disappointed yesterday to read the majority opinion, which did not go far enough. Yes, it acknowledged that the Second Amendment is not an absolute right. Yes, it acknowledged the Second Amendment is not without limitations. However, because of the way the language was used to uphold the Second Amendment as an individual right, the NRA and others will be attacking San Francisco with the belief that the Heller decision equips them with an argument to say that we should not keep guns in locked boxes. They will use this decision to suggest we should not think about common sense regulation of guns in our community geared to keeping innocent people safe. And in that way, this United States Supreme Court decision.
And he had an Illinois firearm.
Oh, that's me. Sorry about that.
That happened to me too.
Sorry about that.
At least yours doesn't play Call Me Maybe.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
Sorry about that. He had an Illinois firearm ID card and a concealed carry license in that state. And in Virginia, the gun laws are very, very lax. They're very, very loose. But law enforcement officers will tell you when there's more than one person that has a gun, it makes the situation more dangerous for them because they don't know who the bad guys are.
But you know what?
More guns is not the answer.
Because I live in New York State,
Chicago come from out of state and benefit from lax, incomplete background checks. So they're common sense things that we can do. In fact, states that do comprehensive background checks see their violence against women, the murders associated with women, go down around 40%. And so I live with this. I have fears and concerns for myself, my neighbors, the family that lives with me. I live with this. I don't want to see another mass shooting, period. But I don't need a mass shooting to awaken my sense of urgency on these issues. And we should have a conversation that is inclusive, where there's intersectionality, because this issue deals with issues of race, it deals with issues of sexual violence against women, deals with issues of mental health. There are so many issues that come together that manifest, erupt when a gun is in the hands of somebody that shouldn't have it, or a weapon of war is in our community streets.
By the way, on the Chinese lunar calendar, I didn't get to this. It's Year of the Dog. People born in 1958, 1970, 82, and 94, 2006, born in Year of the Dog. Woof, woof! 20 minutes after the hour, Steve Harvey Morning Show coming up with trending topics and more entertainment.
You're listening to the Steve Harvey Morning Show.
All right, we know our new listeners in Kansas City and surrounding areas are outraged by this story. Talk about tone deaf. Children in a Missouri town are selling raffle tickets, offering an AR-15 assault rifle as a prize to raise money for their baseball team.
What?
Wow. What?
Can you believe that?
No.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, the rifle is the same type of weapon that was used last week in the Florida school shooting that, of course, killed 17 innocent children. The raffle was launched before the shooting, but Levi Patterson, the coach of the team, told the Kansas City Star that he plans to continue with the fundraiser.
He's ignorant.
Yeah. Patterson said he decided to turn it into a positive thing after getting the hate in the form of angry Facebook posts after the raffle was first reported. The weapon was donated as a prize by a team father and co-founder of the neo-show gun manufacturer Black Rain Ordnance, Inc., which is currently pitching a Spec 15 AR pistol on its Facebook page.
Here's the deal. Nothing, and listen to me, y'all, nothing supersedes these people's quest for money and for power. If money is at stake and power is at stake, There is no limit. That's what this whole thing is about. The NRA plays on the Republican power's need for money and power. And they will do anything for it. This coach will do it because he wants money for this team. But one of the fathers of the baseball players, he's pushing his agenda. So if he puts this rifle up, most people will go to his website and see this other pistol that's on sale, and he's selling, making more money. There's no limit.
Come on, Sam.
Money
That's
and
it.
power. It's all this is about. And until you find a way, like these kids are talking about doing, if you accept that money, we will remove you from power. See, now one without the other is empty in
They're
politics.
calling it blood money. Yeah.
Money without the power in politics is empty. It's just a campaign donation then.
Yeah.
Unless you win, it's for nothing. That's the only way we can do this, you all, in 2018 and coming up in 2020, is we have to vote. And anybody that does not support a gun law, anybody, and that has to be the issue. See, you cannot let them change the narrative of the thing. You cannot let them make it economics and jobs again. Because if they make the narrative, the platform, economics and jobs again,
changes.
we're not talking about these
talking
guns.
about guns.
Right, and then we're just waiting for another mass shooting.
Yeah, man.
You know?
It's a
That's-
doggone shame, man. I mean, the whole thing in Sandy Hook happened with them little elementary kids.
Yep.
Columbine
First graders.
happened. This happened. This fool up in this window out in Mandalay Bay. You gotta be kidding me, man.
Yeah.
And don't nobody think we need to do something? You gotta be kidding me.
Most people, I think, are for the Second Amendment right. Most people are. I am for that. I think people should be able to protect themselves. But if you're going to be honest about it, I don't think our founding fathers had these automatic weapons and military-style weapons in mind when the Second Amendment was drafted, when the Constitution was drafted.
So are you implying for the police, or are you implying for the private citizen? Because the majority of private citizens are not allowed to own fully automatic weapons.
It's for anyone.
Okay, well, the gun law says that you and I can't just randomly go out and buy an automatic weapon, so let's deal with the facts here. A semi-automatic weapon is a gun that you and I are allowed to own, and in different places they have different rules. But to imply that anyone can walk out and buy an automatic weapon...
Healed that, so...
And then look, even before that, I don't even know if that would have stopped this young man from getting an AR-15 in Florida. He's
Maybe not.
19 years old. The real conversation is how and why do you need a high-capacity assault rifle? And why are there people in our country that think that that's absolutely normal? That you need something in your home that can kill hundreds of people. We're sick. We have a problem. All of us. Don't try to separate yourself. At some point as a country, we're going to have to accept all of the problems that we have together if we want this to be a together thing.
But how can you when this is so split? There are people who's like us who have no use for guns, who...
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm not an anti-gun like you.
Well,
we're different. I'm just anti-assault rifle, and then these...
Fine. That doesn't matter. Stop the line there. If there are people who are straight up anti-assault rifle, automatic weapons, anti all of it, and then there are people who just refuse to see that as a problem. I don't know where the middle ground is, bro. They've all heard the arguments.
It's so
You
confusing.
don't need it for hunting. You don't need it for this. You don't need it for that.
And if you're so pro-guns, right? Like, why wouldn't you want the strictest rules? Why wouldn't you have extensive background checks?
Yeah,
Well, some people do. Some people do. Some people do. Some people do. But the problem, and the reason I go back to the NRA, is the loopholes. The people making the guns. The gun maker. The people who put the serial numbers on the guns. The people who transport the guns in trucks or whatever transport from warehouse to facility, and guns go missing. And people are like, well, what do you mean guns went missing? What do you say? And in this case in Florida, I think this was, I don't know yet. I haven't read anything. I've looked. How and where did this 19-year-old get this gun?
7.
Was it illegal? Because I'll be honest with everybody.
military-grade weapon. That should not be street legal. Why? What's the point?
Why do you hate the Second Amendment?
No, I don't hate the Second Amendment at all.
That's my point. No, look.
Listen, let me just state this. I don't hate the Second Amendment.
I know you don't.
My father had guns. My stepfather had guns. Any of my family members, especially women who live alone, who are vulnerable, I want them to be able to have a gun. Do I want them to have an AR-15? No. And why? One reason is if someone comes into the house and an AR-15, they're going to blow all the plumbing and the electricity and the whole wall. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the point.
During our Hot Topics meeting that I was reading that you said you are a defender of the Second Amendment, but you don't think civilians should have assault weapons.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I'm a defender of the Second Amendment. I was a little girl growing up in Birmingham, Alabama in the late 50s, early 60s. There was no way that Bull Connor and the Birmingham police were going to protect you. And so when white night riders would come through our neighborhood, my father and his friends would take their guns and they'd go to the head of the neighborhood, it was a little cul-de-sac, and they would fire in the air if anybody came through. I don't think they actually ever hit anybody. But they protected the neighborhood. And I'm sure if Bull Connor had known where those guns were, he would have rounded them up. And so I don't favor some things like gun registration. That said, it's time to have a national conversation about how we can deal with the problems that we have. It's not going to be any single fix to the terrible events of Parkland. You're going to have to decide, well, should civilians really have access to what are really military weapons? What do we do about the age at which people can do this? And finally, let me just say, we also need to realize that if you get that many tips about somebody that they're going to cause harm,
these people are from, Rashid is from Chicago. Like, stop. Just stop. Like,
But
Alice,
also-
I like you as a person, but this is crazy. Stop.
But also, Alice, when you talk about armed guards, the people who are there protecting our police officers, many of them are retired police officers, some of them are on the job. They're trained to carry guns. Those are the people who most Americans around the country are saying should be able to carry guns. Most Americans want, very stringent background checks. They want some sort of gun control. The NRA members are a very small minority of what America actually wants. They're holding the rest of us
First of all,
hostage.
The idea that the kind of gun, the size of gun, the kind of magazines, none of this matters, well then fine. Just pass out bazookas. Start selling neutron bombs on the open market. And then when people start using the bazookas and doing crazy, say, well, it's not the bazooka owner. You see, it's just, it's not the bazooka, it's just the bazooka owners. Obviously, the size of the cartridge matters. Obviously, the kind of weapon matters. That's why you can't buy bazookas, you can't buy neutron bombs, you can't buy weaponized drones, because these things matter. It's very, very frustrating. The shame that I see right now is that, on the one hand, we're not doing enough about mental health, but then we have people who are hiding behind the fact that we're not doing one thing to stop us from doing anything else, and that's wrong, too.
On the passage of no fly, no buy, we're calling on the passage of closing the loophole, but we're calling on a passage of bringing together police and community, the Law Enforcement and Integrity Act. And we will pray this weekend in Houston, marching for peace, nonviolence, and the action of the United States Congress to take violent guns and violent people off the streets of this nation.
Allowed to bring their guns everywhere, into our schools, our parks, and even our churches. But their guns are not toys. They spread lies about immigrants and people of color to divide us and make us scared of our neighbors. And then they say guns are the only way to keep your family safe, all to sell more guns. They spend millions lobbying for laws that allow them to shoot first and stand their ground. But that just makes it easier to get away with murder. Now they're selling insurance that covers the cost when a gun owner kills someone and claims self-defense. Tell the two insurance companies that created NRA Carry Guard that you know who they are, Chubb and Lockton Affinity.
Gun reform, I've had the occasion to be sued by the NRA and the gun lobby. They had me in court for 2 years. The good news is we beat them at the circuit court, we beat them at the appellate court, and we want to see them in the Supreme Court. It's time for regular folks to get their voice again in this process. We've had a major failure by Commissioner Adam Putnam. allowing for folks to have gone unvetted through the federal system to get access to concealed weapons, putting people, everyday people, in danger. We believe that there ought to be comprehensive background checks. We believe that there ought to be sufficient waiting periods, that weapons of war should have no place on our city streets, and that domestic violence abusers should not get access to weapons to snuff out the lives of their loved ones. Those are basic, those are common, and they enjoy a lot of support. In fact, majority support by Floridians all over the country, the state.
Say no to guns. Say no to guns. Say no to guns.
No American should fear for their lives going to school, attending a concert, going to the movies, the mall, or a religious service. We know the steps to take to reduce the prevalence of gun violence in our country. Assault weapons have no place in the hands of civilians. We must demand universal background checks for all gun sales. We must expand access to affordable mental health services and end the stigmatization of individuals with mental illness. You can respect the Second Amendment without disrespecting the lives of Americans. As governor, I pledge to stand up, speak up, and act swiftly on gun sense and gun safety. And I am the only candidate for governor with a track record to back up that commitment.
Arms. I'm a gun owner myself. Somebody I respect a lot and who I follow and, I'm very inspired by on Instagram, Killer Mike. He has a strong position on this. And, I really want to talk to him because I really disagree with him.
You do?
I really disagree with him on this point. He's saying that the AR is just a tool and it's the man that makes the decision. And ultimately I'm like, but without this tool, the scope of destruction would be so much less. And Killer Mike, you're not going to defend yourself or Atlanta or your family from a tyrannical government. They will shut off the power in the black community, turn off the water, and starve you in an instant. It will take no time.
No fight
like
at all.
we know what happened in Katrina, and they was bucking off the bridge when black people started trying to come into the burbs. It's not happening, Killer Mike. You're not defending yourself from a tyrannical government.
I think you and him would have a great conversation.
I would love to. I think
Killer-
Killer Mike is phenomenal.
him.
The sad part about it is not that it's really like two valid sides arguing. It's kind of that one large group of people is being manipulated for the financial gain of one very small group of people. And it's not like a new situation. That's what America is. You know what I mean? That's what capitalism is. You have to have the proletariat and you have to have the bourgeoisie.
The more famous you get, the more you have to sacrifice.
It's just this morning, the governor of Connecticut was saying that since 2012, the death rate of murders by gun violence has dropped precipitously. I mean, a huge drop. And we know that it works. We know where there are stricter gun laws, there are less violent deaths due to guns. So this was a missed opportunity.
I thought it was just like what John just said, a very untrue statement. In reference to an AR-15 and a hunting rifle, those are totally different weapons. I have shot hunting rifles and an AR-15, and they are different weapons, John. And you're lying to these viewers and trying to promote your agenda, and you're wrong. And I did not disturb you, John. Let me finish. I did not disturb you while you were lying to these people. Let me finish and dispel your lies. An AR-15 is a weapon to kill multiple people in a short amount of time. A hunting rifle, you can take one shot, then you have to reload, and you know that, John. Shame on you for pushing the NRA agenda. Shame on you, and there's blood on the hands of people just like you who have this flawed logic and have this narrow mind.
Look, I could say that you have blood on your hands, and here's the reason that gun control people keep on pushing laws that have nothing to do with stopping these attacks. The number one rule that they...
Very untrue statement. In reference to an AR-15 and a hunting rifle, those are totally different weapons. I have shot hunting rifles and an AR-15. And they are different weapons, John, and you're lying to these viewers and trying to promote your agenda, and you're wrong. And I did not disturb you, John. Let me finish. I did not disturb you while you were lying to these people. Let me finish and dispel your lies. An AR-15 is a weapon to kill multiple people in a short amount of time. A hunting
You're
rifle,
lying.
you can take one shot, then you have to reload, and you know that, John.
I said
Shame
a
on you for
semi-automatic
pushing the NRA
hunting
agenda.
rifle.
Shame on you, and there's blood on the hands of people just like you who have this flawed logic and have this narrow mind.
African Americans. Here's the bottom line, though. It seems like in Trump world, you have to be black or brown to be labeled a terrorist. And if you're white and you commit a mass murder, then all murderers become a mass murderer. Then you are something different.
You're mentally ill.
Yeah, right. The bottom line here is this: what does the Second Amendment have to do with this terrorist act? Why are they cloaking themselves in the Second Amendment and their right to bear arms? 47 guns, 100 guns, 4 different homes, 500 shot, over 500 shot. What does that have to do with the Second Amendment? Who has a right to own weapons of mass destruction? Why would I need an AK-47? Because I'm a gun enthusiast? Then keep it and store it at a range, right? Why can I buy 100 weapons over 4 years simply because I don't have a criminal record? This is idiocy. It's insanity. And people are dying, and Republicans are still cloaking themselves in this Second Amendment. It borders on the nonsensical,
but here's the fundamental
but it's
issue.
dangerous for America.
Control in this country. I mean, who are these delicate snowflakes that we can't just tell, no, you're not allowed to have 40 guns anymore, Earl. From now on, you can have 1 gun, max, and 6 bullets. If you can't hit what you're shooting with 6 bullets, then you don't need to be shooting at it. Learn karate or use your words. I'm sick of this narrative that Americans just love guns so much. It's not true. 78% of Americans don't even own a gun. And 3% of Americans own 50% of all the guns in the country. That's the problem, that whiny 3% that needs to feel secure all the time. That's why I think we should do a buyback program. For every gun you trade in, we give you 1/2 inch of penis enlargement. If you trade in 10 guns, you get 5 more inches. And if women want to trade in
Vegas after these things happen, but what we really do be praying for is gun control. You know what I'm saying? Gun control and crazy control.
What do you think the right gun control would be?
I just don't think anybody should be able to get automatic weapons to that magnitude. Like, simple and plain.
Yeah.
Like, for what? Like, what do you need a chopper for? Like, what do you need that shit for? Like, I love guns. Don't get me wrong. I love my Second Amendment rights. I love my right to bear arms. Yeah. But I don't need that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm going to tell you what really pissed me off. This motherfucker sprayed into a crowd of defenseless people who weren't expecting it.
Pharmacists that was down in Charlottesville, they look like a militia. The only way to fight a militia is with another militia. So if y'all really down for the cause, create a militia. Create a militia and get it popping. I am not. I live in the Northeast. These niggas not coming here. You know what I'm saying?
You don't think they're here in the Northeast?
No. Hold on, I'm not done. The militia is not coming here and winning. How about that? Okay. Now listen. Now here's the other thing. There's a Second Amendment thing. Like, if y'all want to strap up. But we're talking about how to react and what we should do as far as Charlottesville goes, right? They are an organized militia. If you're scared, get organized and get ready. I personally am not afraid of them. I'm not. Maybe I might want to call me naive. It is what it is. I feel protected. I am not scared of them. I'm not getting a militia. I'm not strapping up, and I'm not going against them. But if whoever is scared...
What do you feel protected by? What protection?
The area that I live in the country. That's what I do. Call it naive if you want, but it is what it is. That's my answer. It's not going to change.
You live in Jersey,
all I'm saying
it's full of woods. You don't think there's racist militias out there?
Dog, I live 2 minutes from the fucking Hudson River. I'm good.
Back and forth, go ahead.
Hey, host of the podcast, The Teray Show. You must come back to New York. All right, I'm going to start. You have the advantage because I'm here. Your thoughts on the Killer Mike interview?
You know, I was disappointed that he didn't really answer the questions. I think the core question that you ask, if he wants to talk about increasing gun ownership, right? Where is the NRA for black and brown people? It starts as a reaction to the Black Panthers, as you note. Yep. They're not there for Philando Castile. They're not there for they're not there for John Crawford, right? John Crawford was buying a toy BB gun. But the NRA is a gun lobbying organization. They're not here for the people. They're here for the gun manufacturers. Right. John Crawford was purchasing a gun.
Yes.
and open carrying in an open carry state with not even a real gun. So was Tamir Rice.
Shot and killed in a store.
In the toy, one aisle over from the toy store.
Be there for him, for a gun purchaser or a potential gun purchaser, and that Mike is not able to answer these questions. You're asking simple, direct questions. They're not overly partisan. Just, is the NRA there for black people? And we know that the NRA is consistently using black men as a boogeyman to motivate gun sales. Where are you on that, Mike? I need answers on these questions before I can follow you into the pro-NRA, pro-black gun owners. And the whole notion that these men in Starbucks would have survived if they had guns, that's absurd. We know we cannot be taking up guns against the police. That is not how we're going to win the battle against police brutality. Yeah. I could go on all day. I'll let the other guests
And Tiffany, speaking of using black men to sell guns, you know, the NRA have been pretty explicit about the fact, and gun manufacturers have been pretty explicit, that having a black man in the White House really helped gun sales. They scaremongered around Barack Obama, made a lot of money. They actually stockpiled guns to sell, thinking then there's going to be a woman who's going to come bring the black helicopters. She lost, and now companies like Remington that make the AR-15 are financially down the tubes because they don't have a black man to use to scaremonger.
And the NRA TV has made numerous disparaging comments about the first black president. And to Killer Mike's point, I mean, I think his effort to say more black people should go out and buy guns, that actually does a tremendous amount to help the gun control argument, because I can guarantee you the second you have 1 million black men with guns, there'll be a whole lot of people on the other side of the divide all of a sudden very interested in having a conversation on gun control. Right. But I think what's disturbing to me about this trend that we see, right? So he says he's not here to defend the NRA. But you did. By your brand, by your presence on the NRA TV, you then validated this organization the same way that Steve Harvey validated Donald Trump when he stood next to him, the same way Kanye West validated him with his blonde hair and stood in the lobby of Trump Towers, the same way Omarosa crawled all the way deep into the sunken place and validated this man repeatedly through the campaign trail. This is the same thing that Killer Mike did. And it's disappointing. I grew up in Atlanta. He's done amazing things in Atlanta, and I applaud him for that, for highlighting that, yes, there is room for diversity of thought on the left. There's room for diversity of thought among black people. We're not a homogenous group of people. However, the same people who are getting arrested for sitting peacefully in a Starbucks, and for some reason we think the onus is on black people to keep the conversation calm, the same people who are getting shot, who are unarmed, the same people like Philando Castile, these are the people who listen to your records, who are weaned on your truth-telling in hip-hop. And so for him to come on air and then, you know, act like, you know, black people, like, thank you guys for staying calm. Like, sometimes it is okay to be pissed off that you are sitting in a Starbucks minding your own business peacefully, the same way that everybody else is, and the police come and they arrest these men for doing nothing. It's disappointing to see that he wasn't out front on those issues. And if we can just acknowledge that the NRA itself is a dubious organization. They say they have 4.5 million members. I doubt those numbers. It's reminiscent of when you had Congressman Gatz on the show and asked him how many NRA members in Florida. He said a couple million. You said, no, my friend, it's just over 300,000. This is a boogeyman of an organization. They are basically funded by gun manufacturers, not by these members. And so even though he came and offered other organizations that people could join, he still lended them some sort of validity by appearing on their network. And this is a call to other black people. Don't get pulled into the sunken place by appearing on these things, because they will co-opt your message and your voice, and you will be on AM Joy eating crow and apologizing for saying some ridiculous stuff when we call you out on it. And we are always going to be here to call you out. Believe it.
In love. And let me just say, let me give Killer Mike credit for coming out, because he wanted to come on. Okay, I'm just going to be proactive that his team reached out to us and they wanted to come on. So I give him credit, and I want to give him credit for being willing to come on, and because he really did get dragged, okay, on Twitter for this. And he is somebody who's tried to be an intellectual and sort of positive, very liberal voice politically for younger people. I saw him work his magic in barbershops, right, for Sanders. But my question, I guess, the bigger picture is, you know, I'm not anti. Do people think that I'm against everybody having guns? I'm not. Right. But the conversation when it comes to the NRA is so racialized that I'm not sure you can separate. If black people open carried, they'd be killed.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Look, you know, I, for a long time, have held Killer Mike in esteem, one of the intellectual rappers, which is why this moment was disappointing pointing to me that I thought he was allowed himself to be used by the NRA. He's been in media too long to say, I didn't know how they were going to use that. And the clip that you talked about not allowing his children to participate in the March for Our Lives.
Which he says is because his son got bad grades.
Okay, come on. I mean, like, can we not be gun owners and also want sensible gun reform?
Absolutely.
Is that possible? Look,
that's most NRA members.
More people who own guns in an area make more people in that area unsafe. We know that.
Yep.
So increasing gun ownership will not make us safer.
Absolutely. And you know what? We need to continue to have this conversation, but the gun ownership conversation is just different when it comes to black people and people of color. It just is, because we are just not treated the same way. It just, you know, that's just a reality we have to deal with. Tiffany Cross and Teray, we have to do this again. We're going to have you guys in the same city, though, so we can all hang out at the table.
Yes.
We'll add cocktails.
Doesn't make any sense. That does make no sense. So in this discussion, when we're talking about school safety, there are things that we need to address that include thinking about why is this an issue? And part of it is that we have not passed meaningful, smart gun safety laws in this country. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the NRA has grabbed people by their different parts of their body.
The testicles. There's a medical way to say it. It's a medical term. Testicles.
Testicles. Medical term.
Right.
and has caused people to have a lack of courage to address the fact, again, another false choice. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, and I also want smart gun safety laws. Assault weapons shouldn't be walking the streets of a civilized country.
I agree.
We should have universal background checks. It makes sense. It's just practical that you might want to know before someone can buy.
What's blocking the conversation and what's driving our ongoing obsession with guns, it has something to do with the complicity of politicians, right, with business models that I've mentioned earlier. It has something to do with the cowardice of everyday ordinary folk. But it also has something to do with culture. And this is a point that we really have to think about. There's a kind of toxic masculinity at the heart of this gun culture, rooted in a myth about who we take ourselves to be. America's rugged individualism. The government is not going to protect you. We can protect ourselves, right? And there's a way in which this AR-15 is actually the weapon of the Minuteman. Right? There's this whole myth around it. So we have to begin to imagine ourselves differently. I think we need a revolution of value in this country, a moral revolution where we begin to change what we care about, what we demand of ourselves, what we take to be actually valuable. Let me just say this too. Every day in certain communities, babies are walking to school, having to deal with gun violence. Every day in this community, certain parents are burying their children because of gun violence. So there are some people in this country right now, folks that I know who are in my family, who are friends, who've had to deal with this matter as
pictures that match.
Issue, as a matter of a circumstance. And it's all because, as John said, this gun culture that makes people money. It's
a background check. I just want to ask you this because I'm a gun owner. You know, I don't mind that you know that I have a gun. You can come in my house and look for it. You can get all whatever you need. I don't understand why anyone objects to getting rid of automatic weapons. Automatic weapons, they're not for hunting. They do nothing. They're only there to kill. And you'll notice that a lot of the things that have happened with automatic weapons. When we see that, why don't we say, you know, who really needs to have one other than people who are at war?
Yeah, what is that? If we're going to blame guns for this, instead of looking at the facts of the person and where they were and where they were traveling and where they got married and where they came back and all the other flags around them, tell me what law you would have passed that would have made this not happen.
Okay.
I don't think there is a law.
Okay, Charles, so you were saying that you do think that there are some solutions.
Right,
Go ahead.
right. So I think that is always the wrong question. It is always the question that people ask who are advocating for no laws at all, right? Which is to say, what would you do in this particular case that would have stopped this particular crime? There's often not an answer to that question directly. What I think you have to do is...
Then why did the president push for it?
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Hold on.
Don't do that. So what you have to say is, this is unacceptable, right?
Everybody says that.
The level we have is unacceptable.
Yes.
How do we start to whittle away at the numbers. You're not going to solve them all.
Yes, right, of course.
You're not going to solve them all. You just want to start inching down.
If
you get 10, so you start with the idea that, number one, most Americans, overwhelming majority of Americans agree that we should have universal background checks. 40% of all weapons are acquired without a background check in this country. That's a lot of different ways, right? So some of it's off-market sales, but also it's like intergenerational transfers, just transfers. You know, your uncle gives you your first gun when you're 12.
And we don't know yet with this gun how it worked. It was legal. We believe it was legal.
So there are a lot of ways.
Okay, let me get that in.
But the one, type of gun that we have taken out of circulation completely done.
Machine gun.
It's machine gun, right? We did it. It was registrations. You had to register. You had to pay, a big fee or whatever it was that you had to pay. And this idea, the argument about, if you take it out of circulation, then only the criminals will have it, and then the criminals will use it, and we will be defenseless. Well, we don't see a bunch of machine guns running around shooting things up, right? Because eventually things do phase out. We have a lot of guns in circulation, but it is not beyond the pale to believe that you could figure out ways to constrain a particular type of weapon, stop producing it, and that eventually it would phase out.
Before we give another question.
That the gun industry understands where its market is going, that they're not selling more shotguns, they're not necessarily selling more pistols, they are selling more semi-automatics. So they're very reluctant to sign on to anything that would
Is that because the deer are getting faster?
The deer are super fast and they're aggressive, and they don't, but no, I mean, they're...
How many hunters, shoot more than 2 bullets anyway?
Right, and I don't think hunters are the ones buying the guns, it's people who are doing the survivalist stuff, it's people who are doing the sort of camps that are attached to gun shows where you run off into the woods and pretend that you're in the military. It's that kind of thing. It's gaming. And then it's also collectors. It's people. We did a forum last night. I think the 3 of us were together, Jonathan and the mayor and I. And I was talking about a guy I met in Mississippi who's a conservative Republican. We had a really great long conversation. He said, look, I didn't have guns. I wasn't even interested in guns. But when we heard that the president was going to be doing gun control, I went out and I started buying them. And then when I heard it was focused on...
Because they'll become valuable.
They're valuable. So you have people who are collecting them too. So the gun industry understands that they've got to support their industry where their bread is buttered, and it's right now on semi-automatics.
I've seen assault weapons kill babies and police officers. I don't know where we are as a country when a seated member of Congress, acting in her official duties as a member of Congress, and her name is Gabby Giffords, is shot and so debilitated. How is it that her colleagues, out of their own self-interest, if nothing else that is about humanity, how is it they don't act? Their colleague, not while she was engaged in something that has nothing to do with the job of being a member of Congress. How is it they don't act? How is it after 20 babies, 6- and 7-year-olds at Sandy Hook, are slaughtered, that they don't act? I'll tell you, I think what should have happened is they should have closed the chambers of Congress on this House and the Senate side and say, all you members go in there, only you, and spread out the autopsy photographs of those babies and require them to look at those photographs and then vote your conscience.
You think suicide just lives. So what would be the motive in reimposing that same law?
Well, also, I noticed on your data, you didn't put down that 90,000 Americans are shot, 30,000 killed by guns every single year. But the real question is
what percentage of those are suicides, by the way? Do you know?
So one, people like to put that out like it matters, but 2/3.
Well, it does matter, actually.
Well, no, so we'll say
the majority were suicides.
2/3 are suicide, but that means 10,000 Americans are murdered. That's one, and two, which is
just don't use phony statistics. That's all I'm asking.
Two, which is critically important. All the data shows the presence of a gun increases a successful suicide percentage. So that's important.
That's true. So you think suicide? Just as a side note, since you're a liberal, I assume you're for for assisted suicide. Well, you're suddenly against suicide when it's committed with a gun?
No,
or what's your position?
I want to make sure we're all clear, because I know your master of conflation is good, and I just want to make sure.
No, it's not. You can't say there are 30,000 gun deaths and not note that 2/3 were self-inflicted. I'm not for suicide, physician assisted or otherwise. I'm sure you are, but I just want to be clear with our viewers that you're misusing the stat.
I want to be clear and say that the lives that are lost of suicide also matter, and the 10,000 murders should be counted as well.
Look, I'm not for gun killing of any kind. My only point is, look, legislators make laws, and they do so in the hope they will have their intended effect. And we know from 10 years of experience that an assault weapons ban doesn't work. There's no debate about that. The DOJ came to that conclusion after studying it. So why would we want it again? It's a simple question.
So, but actually the real question is, and it's always to you, Tucker, do you believe that we shouldn't have unfettered access to guns in this country? That's the question.
I don't know what that means. I live in a world of specifics. I cover lawmakers who are trying to impose laws on the rest of us, and I try to assess whether those laws are wise and will be effective.
If we're both being honest and want to deal with the gun violence.
I am being honest.
And so what we have to start is a point at where people agree. And what I'm saying to you is, should we have unfettered access to guns in this country?
I don't even know what that means. We don't have unfettered access to guns. Far from it. That's silly overstatement.
That's not silly at all. That's a question I'm trying to get to you so that we can have an honest conversation about what to do after we've agreed with that.
No, okay. So let's get, rather than get in this sort of airy world, let's get into the those words don't mean much. Let's get into the specifics of the legislation that the left, the Democratic Party, is pushing now. They are saying that guns that have something called a barrel shroud ought to be prohibited, outlawed, banned.
Again,
and my question is why? Why would a barrel shroud make a gun more dangerous? Do you know?
But again, that's the wrong question. The question
Why is it the wrong question? I'm responding to a proposal that you support.
Unfettered access to guns. That is what the question is. And what you do successfully, and it works, because you give people red meat, and the fans like it.
I'm responding. It's not about the fans or red meat. I'm responding to an actual piece of proposed legislation in the U.S. Congress proposed by your allies in the Democratic Party, and I'm asking you about the details of that legislation. It would propose banning guns that have pistol grips and barrel shrouds and bayonet lugs. Have there been a lot of mass killings with bayonets? What is this?
What you do well is...
Let me listen. For the past 3 days, I have been on the verge of tears every second, and most of the people here have been crying 24 hours straight. Yes, we need to address mental health. But mental health in this particular issue, let's not get it twisted, is a secondary issue. If someone who has a mental issue did not have access to guns that should only be available in war zones, we would not be dealing with this. Who needs a armor-piercing bullets to go hunting? Who needs an assault rifle to go hunting? You can't even use the prey that you kill with an assault rifle if you indeed do it. No one needs an assault rifle to go out and shoot a deer. No one needs an assault rifle that's capable of shooting 10, 20, 30 rounds off at the same time to shoot a duck or to shoot quail. It does not make sense. The first thing that we need to do, and according to everyone who is here, even gun enthusiasts, is talk about what we're doing with assault rifles. Why should guns that should only be available in war zones, why are they available to people who are mentally healthy and people who are not mentally healthy? That's the issue that we need to deal with. So to say that gun violence is down does not make sense, and to me is insulting to everyone who lost a loved one here and who is dealing with that. It doesn't matter if gun violence is down. 20 children are dead here.
Truly automatic weapons we don't have. You know, we banned truly automatic weapons, I think, in 1934.
Right, but we still got a lot of them around. Come on,
well,
man.
what we have is not automatic weapons, so we have semi-automatic. So they fire in a fairly fast sequence, but you can't pull the trigger and they come like a machine gun. Those are no longer out.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know
what
it
is that there's a repetitive fire. People do hunt with them, and people do also shooting and sport shooting and target shooting and things with these guns. And come to Kentucky, and I'll introduce you to there are a lot of people who like and enjoy this as a sport. But the other problem is if we're going to take away ownership of specific types of guns, you really have to modify something that big as to either be legislation or even possibly a constitutional amendment. We can't allow one individual.
Most people, I think, are for the Second Amendment right. Most people, I am for that. I think people should be able to protect themselves.
But if you're going to be honest about it, I don't think our founding fathers had these automatic weapons and military-style weapons in mind when the Second Amendment was drafted, when the Constitution was drafted. So
are you implying for the police, or are you implying for the private citizen? Because the majority of private citizens are not allowed to own fully automatic weapons.
It's for anyone.
Okay, well, the gun law says that you and I can't just randomly go out and buy an automatic weapon, so let's deal with the facts here. A semi-automatic weapon is a gun that you and I are allowed to own, and in different places they have different rules. But to imply that anyone can walk out and buy an automatic weapon...
And Kimberly, you know, when you interview Republicans, do they still believe that Ronald Reagan is emblematic of their party, or in general, are the Republicans that you interview, have they gotten so far to the right of Ronald Reagan now that what he said is no longer operative as a Republican point of view?
Well, I think when you ask them, of course, they say that they are the party of Reagan still, and they embrace those principles. But the intervening factor that has happened in that time is the explosion of the gun industry. And I think you're right. The point that was made that the NRA is a lobby group for the gun industry. This is an industry that generates tens of billions of dollars in sales in firearms and accessories and ammunition. So in that sense, that is why things are so different now. That is why you see after there is a mass shooting and there is a discussion of gun control, the rhetoric of NRA supporters is to scare people to believe that their guns are going to be taken away and actually spur purchases of guns. We usually see gun manufacturing and sales go up after every one of these incidents, and it's become such a major moneymaker, frankly, that it's really difficult to push against. And that is what keeps the money flowing into these lawmakers from the NRA, and the NRA threats to campaign against them at election time if they support anything, even something as reasonable as bump stock legislation. The NRA didn't back bump stock legislation. They wanted a regulation, something that's a lot easier to implement and also a lot easier to reverse. So it's a very stronghold that it has over these lawmakers.
Right, and so Sarah, you can just throw up a map here of how states are scored by the Giffords Law Center, and of course we know Gabby Giffords, a member of Congress who was the victim of a mass shooter, which changed nothing. Her colleagues in Congress didn't change their attitude toward guns at all. Those are the scorecards. I guess the darker blue means that you're more permissive. And then you look at the polling, which is pretty overwhelming. And NPR Ipsos asked, do you believe gun laws should be more strict or less strict? 75% at the end of February polled said they should be more strict. So the vast majority of the American people are on one side. The self-declared 5 million person strong NRA in a country of 326 million people says they should be more strict. How is it that they have so much power?
Also, the way you get their attention is when you begin to throw people out of office. As long as those individuals say this is one of the issues they care about, and it's not like the NRA where it's the most fundamental issue, you're going to have this problem. I tell people in the ed reform movement, you want to have multiple issues out here. No, the reason the NRA is so successful is because there's only one issue they care about, Second Amendment. You will never see them send a press release out about same-sex marriage or about affirmative action or about DACA. All they care about are guns.
But
you have to fight. You have to fight them like the way they also fight.
But my point was, if I
and Congressman, you know, you mentioned, of course, you know, Dr. King's assassination, Bobby Kennedy. After those assassinations, that did spur Congress on to pass. At the time, you know, meaningful gun control legislation. You know, you cannot buy machine guns because there was gun control legislation that the NRA supported. Shipping guns through the mail became illegal because of legislation that at the time the NRA supported. Is it time for members of Congress to turn against the NRA since it has now turned against gun control?
It is time for the Congress to be brave, to be bold, to be courageous. I've said just a few days ago that we should be headlights and not taillights, that we will call to lead, and we must get out there and push. The American people, more than 90% of the American people, both Democrats and Republicans, want us to do something. We must not just live in fear. and not be afraid of whether we're going to lose some votes here or there, or that we will not receive political contribution. We have to do what is right. Sometimes you have to go with your gut, with your heart, with your soul.